Hey everyone, Rodney here at Cleaves Tech, and today I'm going to show you how to create some interesting text effects and how to manipulate Stable Diffusion to give you different results with text. I've been creating a lot of these types of images lately, and I've had quite a few people ask how I do it, so I figured I'd throw out a video showing exactly how. For any of my subscribers, you may have noticed I've not had a video out in a little while, but I should be back now to getting more out. I'll give you more of an update at the end of the video so we can get right into this. I'm not going to cover everything in detail when it comes to text. I do have previous videos I do recommend watching if you're not sure about some of this stuff. So for this, I'm going to primarily be using Fooocus. I am going to show you how, basically how I do it in Swarm as well, and you can do it in other user interfaces. These are some of the images that I've created, and so I'm going to be showing you some of these sorts of things, how you can accomplish these sorts of images, get the text to do what you want, because a lot of times I get a lot of people asking me, well, how do I get it to curve around, like, make it look like it curves around the wood? How do you get it to be on the ground? In Fooocus, I have a preset set up, but I'm going to be using the speed setting. I do have it set for 896, 1152, and that's also the same size as I have set for my image that I created down here with the text. Now, I do have the input image section checked off. We have the advanced section checked off, and you'll notice I have this set to CPDS. And I have it set to a pretty high amount, but that we adjust as we play around with the text. If it has a hard time keeping the text together, then we usually go with a higher level. If it doesn't, then I'll lower that down to allow it, give it more creativity. I do in my negative prompt, I do have text and a higher weight. The reason for that is because a lot of times, if you'll notice up here, we do have in the prompt, we do have the text we want, because that helps guide the whole generation. But what can happen is sometimes it'll create extra versions of the text. You'll have double text, things like that. And I found by putting the text in the negative, that helps reduce that. It doesn't eliminate it, but it does seem to help. Now, the other things I have is I have it set up for Focus V2 on this, and I usually set this to a random style to start off with. That way I can kind of experiment, see what happens by just generating some stuff. Sometimes I'll get some interesting results, and then I can use those styles further after that point. Obviously, if you're not looking for certain styles, you know exactly what you want, then you can just put that sort of stuff in the prompt. Now, under models, I find certain models work better, but it all depends on what you're trying to go for. So that's entirely up to you. And I do find I'm going to be using different lures in here because I find these sorts of things a lot of times works pretty well with certain lures. If you're going for a certain effect, that's where these came in, and I started doing a lot of these, just using different, like this one here is a potato chip one, is a root one, stained glass, bubbles, you name it. I've tried different ones just to get different effects out of each one. So for this one to start off with, we're going to be using the this fossil one that I found was pretty interesting. Really check it out. It does some really good images. So we're going to use that one. The other thing you want to know is in here, let's see, we're going to go into the advanced section under developer debug mode under the control tab. And I always check these off to start off with, just so when I'm doing these things, if I move something over to in painting, I don't have to remember to go in here and check that off. You don't need it for the initial steps. I want to do in painting and fixed any letters that might be messed up. You will need to check this off so you can use in painting with the image prompt. I also do check off skip preprocessors. The reason for that is there's actually a bug in Fooocus where a lot of times with these sorts of images, if the text is, you know, at an angle or anything different than just straight on text, it's hit or miss when this happens, but it won't detect it and it won't influence the image generation. Thing is, I found you don't even need that, because if it does detect it, it's going to come out the exact same way, a white background with black. So basically, this has already been processed in a sense. So we don't need to use the preprocessor for this sort of image. I find it just works better. Boom, check that off. I don't have to worry about that bug and it being hit or miss. And that's mostly how the settings I have set up for Fooocus. Now, I'm going to show you also quickly in Swarm as another example, just to show that you can do this with other UIs. And a lot of these are all similar. So I've gone here, I've got my LoRa selected, a model, I've got my prompt just like the other one. And now the difference here You know, we still have the same resolution set up. And here I have my control net turned on. I have the input image here, same thing. Now I do have control net preprocessor turned on, but I have it set to none. And that'll work fine for here because we're going to be using the depth one. And as I said, this is already set up as a depth technically for what we need. So we don't have to worry about that. And the same settings in here, I have it as a stop at 75 to start. And once that's all set up, all we need to do, I'll go ahead and start doing it in Swarm just to give you an idea that this works in Swarm. But then I'm going to move over to Fooocus. And as you can see, as it starts generating, we get that image with the text. Now you'll notice as it gets to a certain point, it can start to fall apart. That's because it gets to that point, the control net N. So it's 75% of the way through the image generation process. It stops using that control image. Now, what can happen is sometimes these letters will start to fall apart depending on what you're doing, especially if you're using multiple LoRa's. So that is something to keep in mind. If you find that this text is falling apart every single time and it doesn't stay together, you may need to increase this up to a higher number, but it can also impact how much creativity that the AI allows for. So that's how you do it with Swarm. And like I said, other user interfaces are very similar. I'm going to go back into Fooocus. We're going to go ahead and do this. Now, I usually set it up to about 8 to 10 images just to get a whole bunch of different ones to start off with to get an idea of the results and see if there's any styles that I like. Let me go ahead and do that. Okay, so we have a whole bunch of images generated, and the biggest thing you're going to notice through a lot of these is that text at the top that's all jumbled doesn't stay together very well. And even sometimes the bottom text won't. So, but we can go through these, find any that we might like, and then at that point, I'll usually, if I find one that I think is pretty interesting and I like the style, then I'll look up the style, switch it over to the style, and then continue generating from that point. As you can see on some of these, we do get some extra text in some as well. Now, if some of these would be difficult, like this one here, for example, if we like this one and we wanted to get this text to be what we want, the problem is it's going to go into his head. So even if it did, it wouldn't look right, but also it's going to have a hard time even with inpainting. It's not going to want to put that text there. So that's going to be difficult to work with. Now what I am going to show is I'm going to actually pick one of these. I actually like this one. I'd go through and probably remove this text, you know, with inpainting and then go from there. But that one actually came out pretty well. Now let's say we take one of these images that the text is not correct. Now I'm going to go with this one just as an example. I'm going to bring this down into the inpainting. Now let's say at this point we want to get where the to show up. Now it's going to have a little difficulty because it's going to want to keep putting that foot there. And in order for this to work, we're going to have the inpaint respective field here. We want to have that on 1 under the developer debugged advanced mode. And the reason we want that, because normally it's at 6 something, but what happens is when you go ahead and generate at this point, if we go like that, it will zoom in on that area and work on it. And at that point, this will not line up. So trying to get the text, and I do discuss that in my previous text videos. I go over how all that works. But so for the purpose of this video and doing text that's large like this, it's just easiest at this point just to crank that up to 1. That way it uses the whole image when it regenerates. And we don't have to worry because these two will still line up. And that, since we have this checked off, the mixing image prompt and inpaint, it can still use that. Now it does have to be on this image when we go to hit generate. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is when we do that, if you're doing it in Fooocus like I just showed, and you're using a random style, I want to now find out which style it's using, because if I use a random style, a lot of times that's not going to come out the same way. So actually, it was logo design. So I'm going to go into the styles. I'll uncheck this and use the logo design one. That way I'm using the same one. I find that ends up working much better. Everything else is the same. We're still using the same LoRa. And now once we have everything set up and I have that area highlighted. We're gonna go, or masked, I should say. We're gonna hit generate and see if we can get it to put that text there. Now, if it has a hard time, we may have to increase the weight or the stop at to get that text forced in there. As we can see, as it's running, it is going to get to a certain point, and it may start to fall apart at that point. Nope, it looks like we're going to get it this time. And then we could go in and get the apostrophe, things like that. We could, edit anything else that's in here. But that gives you an idea of how the whole process works, and if you need to do inpainting, how you can get that inpainting to work. But like I said, in order for this to work and to line up with this image, you do need to make sure that you have your inpaint section down here, the inpaint respective field, set to 1, so it uses that whole image when it does that. It won't zoom in at all. On to the next one. Let's get rid of this. We'll go back into the image prompt, give you a couple different ideas here. We're going to do a simple one first, and I'm going to show you how to get other text effects and how to manipulate and get Stable Diffusion to do what you want with the text. Because sometimes you're not going to want just flat text. You're not just going to want plain text. So for this one, I'm going to go ahead and use a different LoRa. I may have actually already mentioned this one in a previous video, but it's a really good one. It's one of my favorites. And I do have some different text in here already posted. One of the supporters of this channel, he's got a couple of LoRas. He's working on some more. But the flower one's good. I like the bubble one as well. I do find the flower one of his works a little better for the text, so I'm going to use that for this video. So for this one, let's change up the prompt. Now I'm going to have this be "Don't worry, be happy." Don't worry, be happy. Now, I'm just going to leave this as made of flowers. That's it to activate this one, basically. The one thing I want to point out here when it comes to these is the text that's in here does affect your prompt. It's not ignored as just text to put on the screen. Anything you put into here will impact the overall prompt, just as if you put it outside of there. So sometimes you may have a hard time getting certain results from these effects, and it may be because of actually what you're using for a word. And that's what I want to show you on here. We're going to uncheck this. I'm going to go back to random for that. We're going to use the Fantastic model, same thing. And yeah, so let's go ahead and see what happens with this one. That's good enough for that one for what I wanted to show. Now, the biggest thing in here, I just said text, "Don't worry, be happy," B-E-E, made of flowers. Now, what I wanted to show was a couple things here with this one. You'll notice each one of these images has bees in it. And that's because obviously the word "be" is in there. Even though it's part of this text in quotes, it does still affect the overall prompt. And so sometimes you may be putting something in your text that could be impacting your overall image and you don't realize it. Just keep that in mind. That could definitely be a factor. And another thing you'll notice, like with this one, is if the font is big enough and thick enough for this one, for example, it tries to create the letters out of flowers. Now, if that was a script font, very thin, one, it would be harder to generate, but the other thing is you wouldn't get that effect of the flowers out of this LoRa, for example. If you were trying to make something out of string, let's say it was a string LoRa and you were using a font that was more of a script, then that would probably work better. So those are the things you want to keep in mind when you're doing these sort of text effects. The font is actually a major factor, and the way the lettering is laid out is a major factor on how these images get generated. So you do want to keep in mind what fonts you use and how they can impact the results that you're getting. Okay, so for the next one, I'm going to go try to create something, let's say with a superhero called the Brickmaster. So I've got this image set up, I got these letters, and I'm trying to influence it to get it because I want it to be the guys smashing through a wall, the letters are made of bricks kind of thing. So we've set this at around 7, and I got a prompt in here, a superhero called the Brickmaster smashing through a brick wall, text the Brickmaster. and made of RAL bricks, and that's because the LoRa I'm using from RAL finger, that's the trigger word. And see here, so I'm not going to use any styles on this one. I've got my LoRa set up here. That would be this one here, the brick style from RAL finger. Make some awesome LoRas, real fun to mess with. I have a lot of fun with his. And yeah, so we're going to go ahead now. Now let's go ahead and just change this model up. And let's see what. Let's go with Cheyenne for this one, just for fun. Now, sometimes you're going to find certain models work better. So if you don't get the results that you're trying to get sometimes, or if the letters are falling apart, try a different model. Sometimes that can be enough just to influence things and get things working better. Okay, so as you can see with these, a lot of them, the text started falling apart. I actually expect it. When you start doing text like this, it can be very difficult to keep that text together because it's not in a straight line. So the models are going to have a harder time. They're going to want to get rid of it. But as you can see here, it gets creative with how it tries to use that text because it is not in a straight line. And you can take advantage of that to get really creative. Now at this point, what I would try to do is just go ahead. I'm gonna increase that up a little bit and let's see if we can keep that together. I may even throw the weight up a little bit more and let's try generating again to see if some of those stay together better. Okay, so we got a little bit better results here now that we increased the weight. It actually kept everything together and I get a little bit better effects on that one. So it really comes down to when you're doing these, a lot of times you're going to have to sit there and play with those adjustments. If you watch it while it generates, you can get an idea of where it might fall apart and where you might need to increase that if that happens. Now for the next one, I'm going to do one more just to give you an idea of another way you can influence how the text works. So on this one here, you'll notice I've put some perspective on this text, and that should, at this point, help guide the AI into putting that more flat on the ground if I want it to, let's say. What I'm trying to show you is how you can use and shape the text and, you know, get Stable Diffusion to do what you want with the text. I'm going to change the prompt here. So yeah, we'll leave that there. And I'm going to change the LoRa, you know, on the dry earth style. Here, this is another RAL finger one, of course. So this is the LoRa we'll be using for this one. I have that set up. And sometimes you may need to adjust depending on the effects you're going for with these LoRas. You might want to adjust some of the, you know, the weights and stuff. I'm not for this video. But sometimes that will be a factor. For this one, I'm also going to change over to a different checkpoint, the Chinook one. This is going to be, it's more geared towards cinematic styles. And so I'm going to put in a cinematic style here. We're going to go down to 4.5 for the guidance on this one for what I'm looking for. So we have our image set up. I have my prompt set up, a woman walking away, cracked and broken text, leaving it all behind. Now, I mentioned the cracked and broken text because I want it to break apart that text as well, which it will do a little bit with this LoRa, but I find just by putting that in there, you can get that effect as well. So don't be afraid to try to have it apply things to the text like I've done here to get some of those text effects. It won't always work exactly how you want. And sometimes it can be difficult depending on the font that you're using and on these settings down here. So I think we've got everything set up the way I want it for now. So I'll go ahead and generate. Now we have our images. And as you can see, pretty much every single one here, it did exactly what I wanted. And I didn't even have to really put it in the prompt of what I wanted. It automatically knew what I was shooting for, basically. Now, like this image, for example, you can see I had some perspective to it, and it matched it up to the dress and made it look more like it wrapped around. This one here, the way that I created these images is I created the text and I created a mirror image for the text. Just like these, they were just black on white, and I used that, and it understood what I was going for when I did that. And when we look through all of these, it pretty much did the exact same thing on all of them. This one it did a little bit differently. It actually tried to curve it around her as it was walking away. So that's another thing that can happen as well. So it takes the influence of the text and it uses that to shape how it puts it into the image. So you can be creative with that. You could actually curve the text a little bit around edges to try to make it go around a cylinder or like a can. Although you don't even a lot of times have to do that if you give it enough room down here to start warping the text. Then you can actually get it to warp slightly around objects. So that's another thing to keep in mind as well. You can do a lot of different things. I've only shown you a few different ideas on how you can make use of this and on how you can get different text effects. Well, that covers what I wanted to show when it comes to the text effects. Now, for all the Fooocus users out there, and some of you may already be aware, but Mashbit, who has been the person maintaining and adding all the great features to Fooocus for the last year, has decided to move on to other things. Now, this, of course, doesn't mean that Fooocus is dead, since it's still the best interface, in my opinion, for SDXL, and it still is usable. Everything works. But it could mean that there may be no new features coming. Time will tell if somebody else takes over or not. I do want to thank Mashbit for doing such a great job this year in making Fooocus what it is today. He's done a phenomenal job. Now, for myself, this last month has been very busy outside of YouTube, and hopefully that'll change soon. I can get back to making more videos again like I was able to before. Of course, that is as long as YouTube doesn't pull down my channel again. That's a long story, and I'm not going to dive into it all, but basically, YouTube needs to do better, in my opinion, when it comes to their automated stuff and taking things down and then having to appeal and bring everything back. It's just a long process, and people lose money because it can easily take a week or two before things get back to working the same way they were before. Now, as many of you probably are aware, there's a new favorite model called Flux that came out recently, and I have been experimenting with that and also using Swarm since Fooocus doesn't support Flux. And most likely I'll have some videos on that soon. The good thing is if you don't have a super duper card with massive amounts of video RAM, you still may be able to use that. It looks like the way things are going. But I haven't done any videos yet since that stuff keeps changing daily, and I'm waiting till things stabilize a little bit before I do. That way when I make a video, it's not obsolete 2 days later. I'll probably be mixing in some of that content with my regular content in the future. Now, I do hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, please consider hitting the like button. I will also mention I do have Patreon set up, and you can join. I do have the free tier at least on there, so if something happens to my channel in the future, I usually will post something there. I do want to thank you for watching, and have fun creating.